You think you know someone. You trust them, share your life, your dreams, your secrets. But what happens when the trust you've built over years crumbles in an instant? Sarah thought she had the perfect marriage, until one night, everything changed. It started with a secret glance, a touch that meant nothing, but then it became so much more. What would make a woman betray the one person who loved her unconditionally? What would make her cross that line with the one man she knew she could never take back? And when the truth finally comes out, what happens to the friendships, the love, and the future that was once so certain? This isn't just a story about infidelity. This is a story about choices, consequences, and the kind of betrayal that leaves you questioning everything you thought you knew about loyalty. Stay with us as we unravel the twisted, shocking truth behind Sarah's decision, and the aftermath that no one was ready for. Sarah's life seemed like something out of a picture-perfect movie. To the outside world, she had everything: a beautiful home nestled in a quiet neighborhood, a husband who adored her, and a routine that offered stability and comfort. Every morning, she woke up beside Alex, the man she had built her life with. They shared a bond that others envied, or at least they thought they did. Their love was built on years of shared memories, vacations, inside jokes, late-night talks, and the gentle rhythm of daily life together. Alex was the kind of husband who noticed the little things: how she liked her coffee just a bit stronger in the mornings, or how she couldn't sleep without the sound of a fan humming softly in the background. He made her laugh, often over the most mundane things, and he loved her with a kind of quiet devotion that gave her the security she'd always wanted. People told her all the time how lucky she was to have a man like him, and she believed them, or at least she used to. On the surface, their marriage seemed like the epitome of happiness. They'd share meals, sit on the couch watching shows they'd always watched together, and spend weekends visiting friends or relaxing in the comfort of their home. They had created a life that appeared solid, grounded in love and mutual respect. They were the couple everyone looked to as an example of how things should be. But beneath the surface, a subtle shift had begun. It wasn't anything drastic at first. Small, almost invisible moments that she chose to ignore or brush off. There were nights when Sarah would catch herself looking at Alex, realizing she didn't recognize him in the way she once had. Not physically, but emotionally. The long conversations they used to have were less frequent now, replaced with quiet dinners where the TV did most of the talking. His touch, once so spontaneous and tender, had become predictable. She began to notice how he would come home late, absorbed in his work, or how he'd slip into his own world more and more often, leaving her to fill the silence alone. It wasn't that they fought, it was just that the spark that had once ignited their connection felt dimmer, harder to find. She tried to ignore it, telling herself that this was just the normal ebb and flow of life. After all, they'd been together for years, and relationships, like anything else, go through phases, right? They had a good foundation. That's what she'd convince herself every time she sensed that creeping feeling of distance between them. And then there were the moments that really stung: the forgotten anniversaries, the fleeting glances he'd cast at his phone during dinner, the way he'd smile politely when she tried to start a conversation, but never really seemed to engage. Sarah started to wonder if he was still really seeing her, or if he was just going through the motions like she was. There were days when she'd sit by the window, watching the world go by, wondering if this was all there was. She had everything she ever wanted, but still felt like something was missing. Something she couldn't quite name. She convinced herself that she was just being silly. That all couples go through periods where they feel like they're living parallel lives instead of truly living together. But deep down, Sarah knew something was changing. She just didn't know yet how much it would cost her, or how far it would take her from the life she thought she knew so well. What she didn't realize then was that sometimes, it's the quietest moments, the ones that seem most inconsequential, that end up shifting everything in ways no one ever expects. And sometimes, the one thing you think will always be there with your partner, your rock, becomes the one thing you no longer recognize. It started with a simple conversation, an innocent exchange between Sarah and Ben, her husband's best friend. They had known each other for years, their friendship forged through countless dinners, barbecues, and late-night talks. But that night, something shifted. The words they shared no longer felt casual. There was an electric tension that lingered between them, one neither of them was willing to acknowledge right away. It wasn't that Sarah had been looking for something, or that Ben had made any overt advances. It was just a subtle change, a lingering glance, the accidental brush of hands as they passed the wine bottle back and forth. As the night wore on, The distance between them seemed to collapse, the space once filled with familiarity and friendship now thick with something far more dangerous. They had always gotten along well. Ben was charismatic and witty, always able to make her laugh, always the life of the party. But in that moment, Sarah realized how little she had truly seen him, how little she had allowed herself to see him. His smile, usually carefree, held an edge tonight, a subtle depth she couldn't place. And when he looked at her, really looked at her, something inside her stirred. She could feel her heart beat a little faster, her breath coming a little shorter, as his eyes locked with hers in a way that felt oddly unfamiliar. Ben was the first to speak. His voice, low and measured, felt almost like a secret between them. "I never really asked you this, Sarah," he said, his words hanging in the air, "but what's been going on with you two? You and Alex, I mean." Sarah froze, her mind scrambling for an answer that wouldn't betray the truth she hadn't even fully admitted to herself. "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice too high, betraying the tension in her chest. "I don't know," he shrugged, his smile just a bit too knowing. "You guys seem fine, but you don't seem happy, you know? Like, really happy." The words hit her harder than she expected. The truth of them lay in the space between them, an unspoken acknowledgment of what had been building for months. Ben knew, or at least suspected, and the realization made her heart pound in a way that felt both terrifying and liberating. "You're reading too much into it," she said, trying to sound light, but she could feel the weight of her own denial. "We're fine." But Ben didn't buy it. Instead, he took a step closer, his hand lightly resting on her arm as he lowered his voice. "You deserve more than just fine, Sarah." That simple statement, so soft, so sincere, sent a shiver down her spine. She knew it was wrong. She knew it in her gut, in every corner of her mind. But at that moment, everything inside her seemed to whisper something else. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was something more than the emptiness she'd been feeling for long. She found herself nodding, almost against her will, her body betraying her. And then, without thinking, she did something she would never have expected of herself. She kissed him. It wasn't forceful or desperate, it was slow, tentative, almost as if she was testing the waters to see if this was real. But once their lips met, it was like a dam breaking. All the years of emotional neglect, of unspoken desires, of yearning for something more, rushed to the surface. And the kiss deepened, and with it, the pull between them. For a moment, it felt like an escape. Like all the things she had been hiding from her dissatisfaction, her loneliness, her growing resentment toward Alex melted away in the heat of Ben's embrace. It wasn't love, not yet, but it was something else, something Sarah had been missing for too long. When they pulled apart, both breathless, the room felt different. The walls felt smaller, the air heavier, as if they had crossed a line they couldn't come back from. Sarah's heart was still pounding, but there was a part of her that felt alive in a way she hadn't in ages. It was intoxicating, this feeling of being seen, of being wanted. And Ben, standing in front of her, looking at her like she was the only person in the room, made her feel like someone again. But then, the guilt crept in. She looked at him, her mind clouded with confusion and fear, and tried to pull away. "I shouldn't have done that," she whispered, her voice shaky. Ben didn't let her move. Instead, he cupped her face gently in his hands, his gaze intense. "You don't have to apologize," he murmured, his lips brushing against her ear. "We're both adults. We both know what we want." And just like that, the resistance in Sarah started to crumble. She didn't want to think about Alex, about what she was doing, about the consequences. She wanted to feel good, to feel desired. The need for something, anything besides the numbness she had been living in, overwhelmed her. She let herself be pulled back to him, her hands trembling as they moved to his chest, then down his body, pulling him closer. The tension in the room built again, but this time there was no stopping it. They moved to the couch, their hands fumbling with each other's clothes, their breath ragged with anticipation. Sarah tried to hold on to some semblance of morality, but the truth was, it felt too good. The guilt, the shame, it all melted away under the weight of Ben's touch, his lips, his body. She told herself it was a mistake, that she could stop at any time, but the truth was, she didn't want to stop. She didn't want to think about how wrong this was. And when it happened, when it crossed the line from emotional to physical, it felt like both a release and a surrender. She had crossed a threshold she couldn't unsee. The secrecy of it, The thrill of betraying Alex in the very place they had once shared their most intimate moments added to the forbidden pleasure she experienced. It was a secret, one she could never share, a part of herself that was slipping further away from the woman she thought she was. As they lay there afterward, tangled in each other's arms, Sarah felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of her wanted to push Ben away, to end it all before it got any more complicated. But another part of her, the part that had been so starved for attention, for excitement, for passion, wanted to stay lost in this moment for as long as she could. The next morning, as she left Ben's apartment, her mind was swirling with guilt and desire, regret and pleasure. She didn't know what she had started, but she knew it would change everything. She had crossed a line, and the woman who walked out of that apartment was someone she didn't fully recognize anymore. It had been a few weeks since that night with Ben, and the weight of her secret hung over Sarah like a storm cloud that never quite broke. Every conversation with Alex felt like a tightrope walk, every glance from Ben felt loaded, and every moment of silence felt deafening. She could feel it building, the moment when everything would come crashing down, when the wall she had so carefully built to hide the truth would finally crumble. It started subtly, like the hum of electricity before a storm. The small, innocent things that used to feel familiar now carried an edge. Alex had become more attentive lately, perhaps sensing the subtle shift in her, but he had no idea why she was pulling away. She hated herself for it, for the way she avoided his touch or dodged his questions, but she couldn't bring herself to tell him the truth. The secret gnawed at her, and she couldn't let go of the shame that wrapped itself around her every time she looked at him. She was betraying him, and the guilt was suffocating. One evening, as they sat together in the living room, Alex leaned over and kissed her cheek, a gesture of affection that once felt warm and safe, but now felt like a reminder of everything she was doing wrong. "You're quiet tonight," he said, his voice laced with concern. "Are you okay?" Sarah's heart thudded in her chest. She swallowed, the words caught in her throat, and for a split second, she considered telling him everything, the affair, the lies, the way she had allowed herself to get lost in Ben's touch. But the thought of seeing the hurt in Alex's eyes, the betrayal that would follow, kept her silent. Instead, she forced a smile. "I'm fine," she lied, her voice thin, almost foreign to her own ears. But it was hard to keep the mask on. It felt like everyone around her was beginning to notice. That night, Ben sent her a text, simple and innocuous, but it made her blood run cold. It read, "We need to talk." The words felt like a bomb with a countdown, ticking steadily toward destruction. She had no idea what he meant, but she couldn't shake the feeling that he knew, that he had somehow pieced together what had been hidden from everyone else. Her stomach twisted with dread. And then, the phone rang. It was Ben. She hesitated before answering, her breath shallow, her heart racing. "Sarah," he said, his voice steady but low, almost too calm. "We need to talk. Tonight. You know what this is about." Her hands trembled as she clutched the phone, the air thick with anticipation. I don't know what you mean," she said, though the lie felt hollow. "Don't play games with me, Sarah," Ben snapped. "You and I both know that we're running out of time." She could hear the tension in his voice, and it made her sick. The air felt suffocating as she held the phone to her ear, wondering if the truth was finally about to surface. How long could she keep this up? How much longer could she lie to Alex and to herself? As if on cue, Alex entered the room, his eyes scanning her face. "Who was that?" he asked, his tone casual, but Sarah could sense the unspoken question hanging in the air. He didn't suspect anything, not yet, but it felt like everything was teetering on the edge. Sarah quickly ended the call, her chest tightening. "It was just work," she said, the words tasting like poison in her mouth. "Nothing important." But Alex wasn't convinced. He frowned, his brow furrowing as he studied her. "You're acting different. Is everything really okay, Sarah?" The guilt clawed at her insides. She could feel the weight of her secret, heavier than ever. Every word out of Alex's mouth felt like a reminder of the life she was destroying. Her marriage, once built on trust and affection, was slipping through her fingers, and she couldn't stop it. She wanted to scream, to tell him the truth and let the pieces fall where they may. But the fear of losing him, of losing everything, paralyzed her. So, she did what she always did, pretended. "I'm fine," she repeated, her voice barely a whisper. But Alex wasn't fooled. He stepped closer, his hand resting gently on her shoulder, a gesture of reassurance that only made her feel more suffocated. "You're not, Sarah. I can feel it. Something's wrong. And there it was, the crack in the facade. The suspicion in his voice. The way he was looking at her, his concern mingled with something else she couldn't quite place. It felt like a warning. The more she tried to hide the truth, the more it seemed to slip through the cracks. As if on cue, Ben's message popped up on her phone again. We need to talk. Now. Her breath hitched as she stared at the screen. This was it, the moment everything would unravel. The affair, the lies, the distance, it was all going to come out. She could feel it in her bones, the crushing weight of it all. She was on the edge of a cliff, and all it would take was one wrong step for everything to come crashing down. Sarah, Alex said again, his voice breaking through her thoughts. Please, tell me what's going on. She could no longer keep the lie up. The walls were crumbling, and she felt herself drowning in the guilt. She glanced at her phone, then back at Alex, and for a split second, she considered telling him everything, coming clean before it was too late. But then she saw the trust in his eyes, the same trust that had kept their marriage intact for so many years, and the thought of destroying it, of shattering the life they had built, was too much to bear. Instead, she smiled weakly and brushed past him. I'm going to bed, she murmured, the words hollow. I'm just tired. But as she walked away, she could feel Alex's eyes on her, filled with confusion, concern, and something else, something she didn't dare face. And in that moment, Sarah realized that the truth was no longer just a secret. It was a time bomb, ticking away with every passing second, and it was only a matter of time before it exploded. It was a Saturday morning when the storm hit. Sarah had been avoiding Alex all week, pushing the inevitable confrontation further away, hoping it would never come. But when she stepped out of the shower, she saw the envelope on the kitchen counter, the one she had feared for days. It was from Ben, the words scrawled on the outside, "We need to talk. Now." Her heart dropped into her stomach. She knew this was it. The moment when everything would come crashing down. She stood there frozen, the sound of the shower still echoing in her ears, as the weight of what she had done pressed down on her chest. But nothing could have prepared her for what came next. Alex walked into the kitchen, his eyes scanning the counter before landing on the envelope. For a split second, they locked eyes, and in that moment, she saw it, the suspicion, the hurt, the flicker of realization. Without a word, Alex picked up the envelope, tearing it open with trembling hands. The silence that followed was suffocating. Sarah's throat was tight, her breath shallow as she watched him read the message. His face changed, the shock giving way to something darker, something raw. His hands trembled as he dropped the letter, his eyes burning with a fury that she couldn't escape. "Is this what this is about?" Alex's voice was quiet, but the tremor of anger beneath it made her stomach churn. "Have you been seeing him? My best friend." The words were jagged, each one stabbing deeper than she ever thought possible. Sarah opened her mouth to speak, to explain, but the words felt trapped in her throat. She knew there was no excuse, no explanation that would make this right. She had betrayed him, and now the truth was laid bare. Alex, I never meant for it to happen," she stammered, stepping toward him, but he took a step back, his eyes filled with disgust. "I'm sorry. I was so lost. I didn't know what I was doing." "Don't," he interrupted, his voice rising. "Don't tell me you were lost. You knew exactly what you were doing." He looked at her with a mixture of anger and heartbreak, his face crumpling with the pain of her betrayal. "You slept with him, Sarah. You slept with my best friend." She could see the life draining out of him with every word. The man who had once loved her, who had trusted her with everything, was now a shell of the person he had been. She reached out to him, but he flinched away, his face twisted in disbelief. "I'm so sorry, Alex. I never wanted to hurt you. I thought I could fix everything, but I couldn't." Her voice cracked, and tears welled in her eyes, but Alex wouldn't look at her. "Please, just let me explain. I made a mistake. A terrible, unforgivable mistake. I love you, Alex. Please, believe me, I do." He shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. "You love me." His voice was a low growl. "You love me, and then you go behind my back with the one person I trusted the most? How could you do this to me, Sarah?" His voice broke, and for the first time, she saw the raw devastation in his eyes. "How could you do this to us?" Her heart shattered as she saw the weight of her actions crushing him. She wanted to hold him, to take away the pain, but she knew she couldn't. The trust was gone, and once it was shattered, there was no putting it back together. "Alex, I don't know what to say," she whispered, tears streaming down her face. "I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could fix it, but I can't. I can't undo what I've done." Alex stared at her for a long moment, his chest heaving with the force of his emotions. Then, slowly, almost imperceptibly, he spoke. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, Sarah. I don't know if I can ever look at you the same way again." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Sarah's breath hitched, and her knees nearly gave way beneath her. The realization was brutal. Alex wasn't just angry, he was broken. And no matter how much she wanted to fix it, she knew deep down that the damage she had done was beyond repair. In the days that followed, the weight of the aftermath settled over them like a dark cloud. Alex withdrew completely, retreating into a cold silence that was more painful than any argument could have been. Sarah couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. Her mind replayed every moment, every choice that had led to this, and the regret suffocated her. The distance between them grew with every passing day. She tried to apologize, tried to fix it, but the words fell flat. The trust was gone. The love, once so strong, was now tainted with lies. And in the end, no matter how many times she said she was sorry, the damage was irreparable. Sarah had torn apart everything she had ever cared about. And the emotional wreckage was all that was left. "I don't even recognize the person I was before this all happened. It's strange how quickly you can lose yourself in the rush of things, in the need for validation, for excitement, for something that feels real when everything else feels like it's slipping through your fingers. I thought I could hold on to it all, that I could balance my marriage and my own desires without anyone knowing. But now, looking at what's left, I realize just how naive I was. I thought I could fix things, make it all better, but the truth is, I destroyed something I can never get back. The trust Alex had in me gone. The respect I took for granted shattered. I see the look in his eyes now, the emptiness where once there was love, and I realize that it's my fault. It wasn't just a mistake. It was betrayal, plain and simple. I broke something that can't be fixed with apologies or promises. I've spent so many nights trying to figure out where I went wrong, trying to make sense of it all. I kept thinking that if I just excused my actions, just explained myself enough, maybe I could make it right. But deep down, I know there's no explanation that makes this okay. It's not just what I did, it's who I became in the process. I let myself become someone I never thought I would be. Someone who lied to her husband, to herself, someone who sacrificed her integrity for a fleeting moment of selfishness. And now, all I have left is regret. The guilt weighs on me every minute of every day, but I've learned something. I've learned that the cost of losing trust, of compromising who I am, is far greater than any thrill I thought I could find. The price of that betrayal is a lifetime of consequences, a broken self-respect that I may never fully recover. I wish I could take it all back. I wish I could erase the hurt I've caused, undo the damage I've done. But I can't. All I can do now is learn from this. And maybe, just maybe, one day, I'll find a way to rebuild what I've lost, though I'm starting to realize that it may never be the same again. I know the road ahead isn't going to be easy. Rebuilding what I've broken, my marriage, my integrity, my self-worth, isn't something that can happen overnight. There are days when I feel like I'm not sure I'm strong enough to do this, but I know I have to try. For Alex, for myself, for the future I still believe we can have, even if it looks different now. The first step has been the hardest, asking for forgiveness. I've apologized 1,000 times, but I know that words are only the beginning. I'm showing up every day, proving through my actions that I can be trusted again. I'm learning to listen to Alex, to give him the space he needs to heal, while also offering him the patience he deserves. Trust isn't something I can just demand, it has to be earned, and I'm willing to do the work. But I'm also doing the work for me. I've started therapy, something I should have done a long time ago. I need to understand why I let myself make those choices, why I lost sight of who I was and what truly mattered. It's a slow process, and there are moments when I don't know if I'll make it. But I have to keep going. I need to heal, to find my own self-respect again before I can truly ask for his. I know the road ahead will be filled with challenges. There will be moments of doubt, of fear, of wondering if it's even possible to repair something so broken. But there's a part of me that believes in growth, in second chances, in redemption. Maybe we'll make it through, maybe we won't. But no matter what happens, I've learned that healing isn't about perfection, it's about progress. And I'm determined to keep moving forward, one step at a time. Thank you so much for watching and being part of this journey. I hope this story has given you something to reflect on, whether it's about relationships, trust, or the process of personal growth. Everyone has their own experiences with these things, and I'd love to hear yours, so drop a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a challenge in rebuilding trust or finding your own path to healing? Let's open up that conversation together. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who might need to hear this message, and of course, subscribe for more personal stories and insights. Your support means the world and helps us keep creating content that inspires and encourages growth. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.